At my sister-in-law's luxury engagement party, they called me a servant. Stay with me as I tell you how it all happened, and if my story reaches your heart, I'd be grateful if you could show some love and share it with others. My name is Amina Caldwell. I'm in my late 20s, and I've always considered myself a quiet but strong woman. I didn't grow up with much. My parents worked hard just to keep food on the table. But I made something of myself. I became a nurse, and through that journey, I met Darius Caldwell, the man who would become my husband. He came from a very wealthy family, and at first, I thought love would be enough to bridge the gap between us. But I quickly learned that no matter what I did, his family never truly accepted me. They didn't see me for who I was. They only saw where I came from. To them, I was less. No money, no name, no status. His mother, Cecilia, always reminded me in little ways that I didn't belong. And his sister, Monique, made it worse with her arrogance and her habit of humiliating me in front of others. So when the invitation came for Monique's engagement party, I felt my stomach sink. It wasn't just a gathering, it was the kind of extravagant event that could make headlines. A luxury estate had been rented out, with chandeliers, champagne fountains, and gowns worth more than I earned in a year. I wanted to decline, to stay far away from all of it, but I couldn't. Darius begged me to come. He said, "This time will be different. Just smile, get through it, and everything will be fine." Part of me wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that maybe for once they would treat me like family instead of an outsider. But deep down, I knew better. The night of the party arrived, and as I dressed in my modest but tasteful gown, I felt a quiet nervousness take over. It wasn't the kind of fear you feel before danger. It was that heavy dread you feel when you know you're walking into a place where you're not wanted. Still, I told myself to hold my head high. When we arrived, I felt eyes on me immediately. The glittering guests, the laughter, the flowing wine. It was a world I didn't belong to. I forced a smile and followed Darius, reminding myself to stay strong. But in my heart, I could already feel it coming. Something was going to happen that night. Something that would push me to my breaking point. And I wasn't wrong. Darius Caldwell had a charm that could win over anyone. He carried himself with ambition, always dressed sharply, and spoke in a way that made people lean in to listen. But when it came to his family, that strength faded. He became a shadow of himself, bending to their expectations and letting their words go unchallenged. That weakness was something I had learned to live with, but it always cut deeper than I admitted. Then there was Monique, his sister. If Darius was the polished face of the family, Monique was the fire. She loved wealth, loved to show it off, and loved to remind people of their place. Around others, her insults came sugar-coated, dressed as jokes, but the sting was sharp and deliberate. She had a way of looking at me like I was beneath her, and I knew she enjoyed every second of it. Her fiancé, Preston Hayes, fit right into that world. He was a corporate lawyer, smooth in appearance and speech, with the kind of success that spoke before he even entered a room. But behind his tailored suits and polite smiles, there was a coldness in his eyes. The first time I met him, he scanned me up and down with that quiet judgment, the kind that didn't need words. It was clear he thought I didn't measure up, and I had no doubt Monique fed him that narrative long before he shook my hand. And then, of course, there was Cecilia, my mother-in-law. Elegant, always poised, with the kind of grace that demanded attention. To outsiders, she was the perfect example of class. But to me, she was a constant reminder of what I wasn't. She never raised her voice, never lost her composure. Instead, she laced her words with little barbs meant to cut without leaving a visible scar. "It must be hard adjusting to our lifestyle," she once said at dinner, her lips curving into a smile. Comments like that weren't random. They were her way of reminding me that I didn't belong. Surrounded by them, I often felt like an outsider in my own marriage. I tried to ignore the whispers, the stares, the constant reminders of my place. All I wanted was respect. I didn't need their approval, but I wanted them to see me as more than just the girl from a modest family who had married into their world. Before the engagement party, Darius squeezed my hand and said the words he always said. "This time will be different. Just smile and get through it." His voice was soft, his eyes pleading. He wanted peace, wanted me to play along so he could avoid confrontation. And like so many times before, I agreed. But as we walked into that world of luxury and judgment, deep down, I already knew the truth. Nothing was going to be different. The ballroom shimmered like something out of a dream. Chandeliers hung low from the ceiling, scattering light across polished marble floors. A champagne fountain sparkled in the center of the room, surrounded by waiters in crisp uniforms gliding gracefully between tables. Laughter filled the air, the kind of laughter that came easily to people who never had to worry about bills or late-night shifts. Everywhere I looked, gowns flowed like rivers of silk, shoes sparkled with jewels, and men wore suits cut so sharp they could have sliced through glass. I tugged at the hem of my own dress, a soft navy gown I had saved for months to buy. It was simple, tasteful, and to me it felt elegant. But as I stood in that ballroom, I felt as though I'd walked into a world where my best would never be enough. My confidence wavered under the weight of glittering diamonds and polished pearls. I held Darius's arm tighter, silently wishing he could transfer some of his ease into me. The stares started almost instantly. Some were quick glances, others lingered, and I could hear the faintest whispers ripple from one cluster of guests to another. I couldn't make out every word, but I didn't need to. Their eyes said it all. I was the outsider, the one who didn't belong. Monique's friends spotted me, and though they didn't speak, their behavior cut deeper than words. They treated me like air, giggling together, brushing past me without acknowledgement, as though I were invisible. When I tried to smile politely, one of them raised her brows and quickly turned back to her circle, as if my attempt didn't deserve recognition. Then came Cecilia. She glided toward me in a gown that shimmered like liquid gold, her posture perfect, her smile wide enough for the room to see. She leaned close, her voice honeyed, her words sharp. "I'm glad you wore something simple," she said, her eyes flicking down my dress before meeting mine again. "We wouldn't want anyone mistaking you for staff." The words struck like ice against my skin. I forced a smile, though my chest tightened, my face burned, and I felt the heat of shame crawl up my neck. The sting wasn't just in her insult. It was in the effortless way she delivered it, making it seem like a casual observation instead of the deliberate humiliation it was meant to be. I swallowed hard and nodded faintly, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. I gripped the stem of the glass in my hand tighter, steadying myself against the wave of humiliation washing over me. Around me, the party carried on, the music swelling, the laughter rising, but in my chest, the tension only grew heavier. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of the night's cruelty. Dinner was served in courses that seemed endless, each plate looking more like art than food. The waiters moved swiftly around the ballroom, their white shirts crisp, their trays balanced effortlessly. I sat quietly beside Darius, trying to disappear into the background, focusing on cutting the delicate portions in front of me. For a moment, I thought maybe the night would pass without another blow. Then it happened. A man at the next table, his cheeks flushed from too much champagne, turned toward me. His words were slightly slurred as he lifted an empty glass and held it out. "Miss, could you bring me another drink?" he asked, his tone casual, as though I had been hired to serve. The sound of his voice cut through me. For a split second, I froze, unsure how to respond. My fork slipped from my fingers, clinking against the plate. Before I could find words, Monique's laughter rang out across the table. Loud, sharp, and deliberate, it drew everyone's attention. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes glittering with amusement. "Well," she said with a smirk, "she does look the part, doesn't she?" The words hit harder than any slap could have. My chest tightened, and heat rushed to my face. Around the table, a few guests gave awkward chuckles, glancing between each other, unsure if they should laugh or look away. Most chose laughter. It was easier than confronting cruelty. I sat there frozen, my hands trembling in my lap. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it over the music. Every second stretched, the humiliation pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I wanted to vanish, to be anywhere but in that chair, under their stares, drowning in their mockery. I turned to Darius, hoping, praying, that he would speak, that he would defend me, that he would remind his sister and everyone else at that table who I was. But he didn't. He didn't even look at me. His eyes stayed locked on his plate, his fork moving slowly as though nothing had happened. His silence was louder than Monique's laughter. That was the moment everything shifted inside me. It wasn't just the insult or the laughter, or even the judgment in those strangers' eyes. It was the realization that the man sitting beside me, the one who had promised to protect and love me, would never raise his voice for me. He would never stand between me and the cruelty of his family. The humiliation burned, but underneath it, something else sparked. Something sharper, stronger. A quiet clarity that told me I couldn't keep living this way. I sat still, outwardly composed, but inside I knew. That was the breaking point. Something in me had snapped, and nothing would ever be the same. I rose slowly from the table, my chair scraping against the polished floor. No one stopped me, no one asked where I was going. To them, I was invisible again, except for the laughter that still lingered in the air from the insult I had endured. My hands trembled as I clutched my napkin, then dropped it beside my untouched plate. Darius kept his head down, eyes glued to the food, as though the entire scene had never happened. That silence said more than words ever could. I walked through the grand ballroom, chandeliers glittering above me, music echoing faintly against my ears. The room was alive with chatter, but I felt like I was moving through it alone, a shadow no one cared to notice. My chest tightened as I reached the hallway, and once the door to the bathroom closed behind me, the weight of it all crashed down. I gripped the edge of the sink, staring at the woman in the mirror. Her eyes were red but dry, her lips pressed into a hard line. My reflection didn't look like me. It looked like someone smaller, someone worn down. My shoulders shook, not from tears, but from the effort it took to hold them back. I wanted to cry, to collapse, but something inside me refused. I whispered to the mirror, my voice trembling, "No more. Not again." For years, I had endured their whispers, their digs, their constant reminders that I wasn't enough. I had told myself love was enough to survive it, but tonight proved something I could no longer deny. Darius wasn't going to save me. He wasn't going to fight for me. And if I didn't fight for myself, I would disappear completely. I took a deep breath, straightened my back, and wiped my palms against my dress. The humiliation would not define me. It would free me. I picked up my purse from the counter, pushed open the door, and walked out of the hotel without looking back. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even send a message. I left that glittering world behind me, the world that had never wanted me, and stepped into the night air as though I were stepping into a new life. The drive home was silent. Streetlights washed over the car, one after another, like flashes of clarity. I thought about my marriage, the years of bending, of shrinking myself, of hoping he would finally see me, finally protect me. If Darius couldn't speak up for me tonight, in front of his family, he never would. He had shown me exactly where I stood, and I finally believed it. Somewhere between the hotel and my front door, the thought rooted itself firmly in my mind. Maybe this marriage had already ended long before tonight. Maybe I was just now brave enough to admit it. And in that moment, the seeds of divorce were planted. The door slammed so hard the walls rattled. Darius stormed into the living room, his tie loosened, his jaw tight with anger. I was sitting on the couch, my hands folded in my lap, waiting for this moment. He didn't waste time before the accusations began. "What were you thinking, Amina?" he barked. "Walking out like that? Do you have any idea how that made me look? People were asking where you went. You embarrassed me in front of my whole family." I stayed seated, my voice steady even though my chest felt heavy. "I embarrassed you?" I asked softly. "Darius, they humiliated me in front of a room full of people. Your sister laughed at me, your mother cut me down, and a stranger thought I was staff. And you sat there. You said nothing." He waved his hand dismissively, pacing the floor. "That's just how they are. You know them. They joke, they tease. You take everything too personally." I felt the words sink like stones. Just how they are. He couldn't even call it what it was, cruelty. To him, their insults were normal, acceptable, excusable. To me, they were daggers I'd been forced to endure for years. I stood slowly, meeting his eyes. My voice was calm, quieter than his, but stronger. "I am tired of being treated like garbage, Darius. Every time we're with them, I'm reminded that I don't belong. And you let it happen. You don't say a word, you don't protect me. You sit there and let them tear me down." His jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with frustration. "I can't control what they say. You married into this family, Amina. You knew what it would be like. If you'd just ignore it, things would be easier." That was the moment the last piece of hope inside me fell away. He wasn't going to change. He wasn't going to wake up one day and fight for me. He would always choose them, every insult, every humiliation, every silence. I wasn't his partner. I was the outsider he expected to quietly endure for the sake of keeping peace. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't beg him to understand. Instead, I let the quiet fill the room between us. The silence seemed to unsettle him more than anger ever could. Finally, I said softly, "I can't do this anymore." He blinked, confused. "Do what?" "Pretend this marriage is anything more than me suffering to protect your family's pride." He shook his head, muttering under his breath, but I didn't hear the rest. My decision had already been made. That night, I didn't pack a bag. I didn't make a dramatic exit. I simply went to bed knowing something he didn't. I had already started walking away. In my heart, I had chosen dignity over despair. And soon, my life would no longer be tied to his silence. Amina didn't announce her decision. She didn't throw her clothes into a suitcase or storm out in a dramatic rage. Instead, she moved with quiet precision. At night, when Darius slept, she logged into her bank account and created a separate savings, routing her nursing checks into it. She felt a strange mixture of fear and relief each time she clicked transfer. As if each dollar was a brick being laid in the foundation of her freedom. Days turned into weeks, and her plan began to take form. On her lunch breaks at the hospital, she called lawyers discreetly, speaking in hushed tones in the staff break room. The first lawyer she met with explained her rights clearly, her options, and, most importantly, her power. For the first time in years, Amina sat across from someone who wasn't telling her to endure, to tolerate, or to forgive. Instead, she was being told, "You deserve better, and the law will protect you." She walked out of that office lighter, as if the chains had begun to loosen. It wasn't long before she found a modest apartment on the quiet side of town. The place wasn't much, just one bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and thin walls that carried the sounds of neighbors' lives. But when she stepped inside with the keys in her hand, she exhaled as if she hadn't breathed in years. For the first time, she wasn't walking on eggshells. No one would call her a servant here. No one would sit in silence while she was humiliated. This space, however small, was hers. Her friends rallied around her in ways she hadn't expected. Maya brought wine and laughter, filling the apartment with warmth. Her co-worker Danielle dropped off secondhand furniture and helped assemble it, turning the bare walls into something resembling a home. Even colleagues she wasn't close to offered support, sharing stories of their own escapes from toxic families. They surrounded her with encouragement, reminding her through words and actions that love wasn't supposed to break a person down. It was supposed to build them up. Of course, Darius didn't disappear. His calls began almost immediately after he realized she wasn't coming back home. At first, they were filled with anger. "You humiliated me, Amina. Do you know what you've done to this family?" His voice was sharp, dripping with entitlement, as if she had committed some unforgivable crime by refusing to be his family's punching bag. When she didn't answer, the messages shifted. Accusations, guilt trips, and half-hearted apologies wrapped in blame. "You're ruining the family," he spat one evening over the phone. Amina held the device to her ear, listening calmly. But instead of arguing, instead of crying or defending herself, she let the words roll past her. For once, she wasn't absorbing the poison. She ended the call with a steady hand, placed the phone on the counter, and looked around at her little apartment. It was quiet. It was peaceful. And it was hers. Word traveled fast in their town, faster than Amina could have imagined. She hadn't spoken ill of anyone, hadn't shouted her story from rooftops, but the truth has a way of leaking out, especially when people have eyes and ears. The guests at the engagement party had seen the way Cecilia and Monique treated her. They had seen her sit silently, humiliated, while her husband said nothing. And they had seen her walk away, head high, without causing a scene. By the following week, whispers had started to circle in the community. At the market, women shook their heads when the Caldwell name was mentioned. "Did you hear how they called her a servant in front of everyone?" one murmured. Another sighed. "Money can buy a big house, but it can't buy class." The comments spread quietly but persistently, like wildfire carried by the wind. What shocked everyone most was how Amina carried herself. She didn't lash out, didn't rush to defend her name. She simply kept living, showing up to her shifts at the hospital, greeting patients with kindness, and walking through life with the quiet strength of someone who had nothing to prove. Her grace became its own kind of revenge, sharper and louder than any insult she could have thrown back at them. Meanwhile, the cracks in the Caldwell family's image began to widen. Monique's upcoming wedding, meant to be the social event of the season, suddenly faced unexpected trouble. A handful of invited guests sent polite declines, their reasons vague, but their meaning clear. "Due to the family's reputation, we won't be able to attend," one note read. Another declined without explanation, but the whispers in the community filled in the blanks. People no longer wanted to be associated with arrogance disguised as prestige. Cecilia was livid. She had spent years crafting the Caldwell image, polishing it until it gleamed. She wanted everyone to see her family as untouchable, powerful, enviable. Now, because of a single night and a woman she dismissed as beneath them, that image was beginning to crack. At fittings, she barked orders more viciously than usual, her face tight with fury. "How dare they judge us?" she hissed, but the more she tried to silence the whispers, the louder they seemed to grow. And Darius, once so smug, so certain of his family's supremacy, began to feel the weight of what he'd lost. In conversations with colleagues and acquaintances, he noticed subtle shifts. Where once there had been admiration, now there was pity, sometimes even disdain. One man commented, "Your wife carried herself with dignity. Shame you didn't see that." The words cut deeper than Darius wanted to admit. He started to realize the truth. It was Amina who had given him balance, who had made people respect him beyond his family's wealth. Without her, he was just another entitled man standing in his mother's shadow. The reputation he thought would protect him was slipping away, piece by piece, and all he could do was watch as Amina walked through her new life with quiet, undeniable victory. Monique had always been the golden child, the one who flaunted her wealth, her beauty, and her perfect life like a crown. Her engagement party had been the talk of the city, and her wedding was supposed to cement her as the queen of high society. But life has a way of peeling back the glitter to reveal the rot underneath. Barely a year into her marriage with Preston Hayes, cracks began to show. At first, it was whispers, rumors that Preston was spending too many late nights at the firm, dinners with clients that didn't quite add up. Monique brushed them off with a laugh, waving her diamond-ringed hand. "People are jealous," she said. But whispers have a way of sharpening into facts. Soon, Preston's affairs weren't hidden at all. He was seen leaving expensive restaurants with younger women, his arm draped casually around them, as though his vows meant nothing. The first scandal broke when photos surfaced online. The tabloids had a field day, the lawyer with the wandering eye. Monique tried to spin it, smiling for cameras and posting heavily curated pictures of her perfect marriage, but the public wasn't buying it. The harder she clung to the image, the faster it slipped through her fingers. Preston didn't care. He grew colder by the day, dismissing her tantrums with a smirk. "You married me for my name," he sneered during one of their many arguments. "Don't act like you're some victim." The words cut her deeper than she expected, not because she loved him, but because they exposed the truth. She had wanted the status, and now it was crumbling beneath her. Cecilia, once so obsessed with appearances, found herself drowning in her daughter's chaos. She spent her days trying to manage the fallout, calling reporters, bribing editors, begging society friends not to turn their backs completely. For the first time, the proud matriarch looked tired, aged, her carefully curated mask slipping. The Caldwell empire of arrogance was rotting from within, and there was no time left to waste energy on Amina, the woman they had once mocked. And then there was Darius. With his sister disgraced, his mother exhausted, and the family name tarnished, he found himself increasingly alone. His calls to Amina grew more desperate, his texts longer, dripping with regret. One evening, he showed up outside her apartment, rain soaking through his expensive suit, his voice raw when she finally agreed to speak. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me," he whispered, eyes searching hers for even a flicker of softness. "I was a fool. I see it now. Please come back." But Amina had long since built a new life, one rooted in respect and freedom. She looked at him the way one looks at a chapter already finished, a lesson already learned. There was no anger in her voice, no longing either, just a calm certainty. "Darius," she said gently, "I don't even consider it." And with that, she closed the door, leaving him standing in the rain, clutching the broken pieces of a life he had chosen. Amina sat by the window of her small but warm apartment, the city lights glittering beyond the glass like stars scattered across the ground. The quiet hum of the night was a stark contrast to the noise and cruelty she had once lived in. A half-filled glass of wine rested in her hand, and for the first time in years, she felt completely at peace. She thought back to the night everything changed, the luxury engagement, the insults, the humiliation she had endured. At the time, it had felt like the lowest point of her life, but now she understood it had been the beginning of her freedom. She hadn't needed to scream, to defend herself against people determined to tear her down. By walking away in silence, she had taken more power than she ever could have with words. They had laughed at her, mocked her, dismissed her as nothing. Yet now, she was the one who had built something real. Her career as a nurse flourished, patients and colleagues respected her, friends surrounded her with genuine care, and her independence gave her a confidence no amount of family wealth could buy. She wasn't the broken woman staring into the bathroom mirror anymore. She was someone who had found her strength in the very moment they tried to strip it away. Sometimes Darius still lingered in her thoughts, but not in the way he might have hoped. His apologies, his pleas, his regrets, they no longer mattered. He had chosen silence when she needed his voice the most, and that choice had set her free. She bore him no hatred, only the calm realization that she had outgrown him, outgrown all of them. Monique's scandals had spread far and wide. Cecilia's once perfect image was in tatters, and the Caldwell name no longer carried the shine it once had. Ironically, Amina's absence had exposed them more than her presence ever did. She hadn't needed to plot revenge. It had unfolded naturally, each of them unraveling under the weight of their own pride. She raised her glass and took a slow sip, letting the wine warm her chest. A smile tugged at her lips, soft but unshakable. She didn't need anyone's validation now, not Darius's, not his family's, not even the whispers of the community. Her life was hers, finally hers, and that was more valuable than any luxury ballroom or glittering chandelier. Leaning back into the comfort of her couch, she let the words settle in her heart, the words that had haunted her but now made her stronger. At my sister-in-law's luxury engagement, they called me a servant. She let out a quiet laugh, one filled with relief and triumph. They were right about one thing: I serve no one anymore. And with that, she closed her eyes, content in the life she had chosen, free in every sense of the word. Do you believe Amina made the right choice by leaving the Caldwells behind? Or do you think she should have stayed and kept trying to win their respect? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to hear them. And if stories like this connect with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next one.